The Random Jottings of Donald J. in Nelson in Pendle, Lancashire. John had always been a bit skeptical when it came to the paranormal. He had never really believed in ghosts or poltergeists, and had always laughed off stories of haunted houses and spooky occurrences. That is, until he moved into his new house in Burnley. At first, things seemed normal. John went about his daily life, fixing up the old house and making it his own. But soon, strange things began to happen. It started with the power tools. John had been working late one night, sanding down some old wooden beams in the attic. He had just switched off his electric sander and was getting ready to pack up when he heard a strange whirring noise. He looked over at the sander and saw, to his horror, that it had turned itself back on. The sandpaper was spinning wildly, making an awful racket. John rushed over and hit the off switch, but the damage was already done. The noise had woken up his neighbor's baby, and John had a stern talking to the next day. But the power tools were just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, John began to notice more and more strange occurrences in his home. The crockery in his kitchen would move on its own, sliding across the counters and tables as if pushed by an invisible hand. John would wake up in the middle of the night to find his furniture rearranged, or strange symbols scrawled on the walls. And then there were the sounds, footsteps in the hallway, coins jingling on the stairs, and strange whispers in the darkness. John was starting to feel like he was losing his mind. He tried to explain the strange occurrences away, blaming them on his own tiredness or an overactive imagination. But deep down, he knew that something was wrong. He tried to talk to his friends and family about it, but they just laughed and told him he was being silly. John felt more and more isolated and alone, trapped in his own haunted house. Finally, he decided to seek help. He contacted a local paranormal investigator, a woman named Sarah who had a reputation for being both skeptical and compassionate. Sarah listened carefully to John's story, nodding along as he recounted his experiences. When he had finished, she looked him in the eye and said, "I believe you." Together, Sarah and John set up cameras and recording devices throughout the house, hoping to catch some evidence of the poltergeist's presence. They spent long nights huddled together in the darkness, watching and waiting for something to happen. And eventually, something did. Late one night, as they sat in John's living room, they heard a strange sound coming from the kitchen. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the floor. John and Sarah both froze, looking at each other in fear. Slowly, they made their way to the kitchen, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. And there, in the middle of the kitchen, they saw it, a small pile of coins, glinting in the dim light. John gasped, his heart racing. He had heard those coins before, but he had always thought it was just his imagination. Now, he knew that he was not alone in his house. Over the next few weeks, John and Sarah worked together to try and banish the poltergeist from John's home. It was a difficult and sometimes dangerous process, but eventually they succeeded. The power tools stopped turning on by themselves, the crockery stayed put, and the whispers in the darkness fell silent. Today, John still lives in his house in Burnley, but he no longer feels alone. He knows that there are things in this world that he cannot explain. By Donald J.